Hello, everybody, and welcome to Reap the Spoils. Ooh, I'm Mark Sullivan.
I was really wondering if you're gonna bring the voice back. I'm Delilah Luco.
That was fucking awful. I'm Jason Kwasnicki.
I almost forgot to, and then I remembered it's October. It's October, and we're talking about a spooky game, so I have to bring out the dumbass spooky voice that I use every year. Jason, what game are we talking about today?
Resident Evil.
Which one?
Well, technically in the game it doesn't say anything else but remake.
Oh. Yeah, we are. So, first of all, yeah, Reap the Spoils is a monthly spoiler cast. We play a game, then we come back to this show and we talk about it in your ear holes for like, I don't know, 2 hours. It kind of varies on the game. We are going to spoil the entirety of this game. We're going to talk about it front to back, top to bottom. So, if you have not played this game, please pause the episode, go play the game, then come back to this episode and press play and listen to us talk at you about it. Resident Evil, it's not a particularly long game, and there's not a whole lot going on there narratively. We are going to talk about the narrative stuff, and we're going to talk really deep on the design. So, again, if you have not played the game, and also for this game specifically, we're mostly going to be talking about the remake that came out in 2002. You can go play the original as well that came out in 1996 for the PlayStation, the original Sony PlayStation. Your parents will help you hook it up. You can go play that, but we're going to talk about some narrative and gameplay design elements that were introduced in the remake of this game. So that's also the easiest way to find and play this game at this point. Oh, I don't know if I can say that anymore because the PlayStation Plus premium tier has the PS1 director's cut available, so I guess that's also pretty accessible. So what the hell, go play both. What do I care? But play the remake and then come back and listen to this episode. That all being said, that very long-winded explanation, are we ready to jump into a history lesson?
Let's do it.
Yes.
Okay. I'd also like to quickly remind folks at the top of the show, if you are a longtime listener of Reap the Spoils, please go rate and review the show on YouTube and or Apple Podcasts and or Spotify. 5 stars preferred, thumbs up preferred, whatever. The positive reception, it helps immensely. All right, let's do the history lesson. So, I actually forgot about this until I was doing the research. I knew about this before, and I just totally forgot. And I always find this to be an interesting tidbit of history surrounding Resident Evil as a whole. But the original iteration of Resident Evil was originally supposed to be a remake of another Capcom game that came out on the Famicom in Japan, called Sweet Home, which was
I've totally forgot about this, by the way,
Yeah,
until you
I
wrote it.
vaguely remember this. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's funny is that game was actually a video game adaptation of a Japanese movie. So the Resident Evil all stems from from being a remake of a movie tie-in video game for the Famicom. Which is hilarious. I find that to be a really interesting piece of trivia that this whole own franchise was was birthed out of that. But yeah, anyway, production for Resident Evil began in 1993. It was directed by Shinji Mikami, who has since become a legend. He was responsible for Goof Troop back in the day, developed by Capcom. Goof Troop, guys. It's important. That's important video game history right there. But yeah, the original game released in March 1996, so it had about a 3-year development cycle. It released for the Sony PlayStation. It was originally under development for the Super Nintendo and later transitioned to be developed for the PlayStation. This game received not one, but 2 re-releases still on the PlayStation. It basically had an annual release cadence, where they did a revision in 1997 called the Resident Evil Director's Cut, that added some difficulty modes and changed some other things. And that's widely the release that has kind of come out sense, like in digital platforms and
Hmm.
in digital formats. And then in 1998, once the DualShock controller came out, it got another revision, the Resident Evil Director's Cut DualShock version, which kind of notoriously had. Have you guys ever heard the music that was added in the DualShock version?
No.
No.
Oh, I should have set you guys. There's this one notorious track. I'm going to be very tempted to make it the musical introduction to this episode, but it's not technically in remake, so I will refrain. But it's a notorious track that sounds like a bunch of like trombones farting. It's really
Nice.
it was a
Nice.
really, really bad soundtrack, and it's absolutely baffling that they changed it with the DualShock version, that they just changed the whole score and wrote over it with some real bad tunes. It's very questionable.
And charged for it.
Yeah, yeah, and it was like, we give Naughty Dog a lot of shit for a $70 Last of Us.
Sony period now.
Yeah, apparently with the recent rumors coming out. But yeah, Capcom is out here annually re-releasing Resident Evil with like minor changes, or not minor changes, but changes and like new functionality and stuff. I kind of wonder how much those cost back in the day, but I didn't take the time to research that.
Mm.
Um and then the game also eventually came out for PC and Sega Saturn. Then there's a lot of history for this because we're talking about a remake of a game that came out, and the path to this remake is kind of it's very winding and very long. Do you guys remember the Capcom deal with Nintendo?
Yeah, the one where
No.
they said they would cut their heads off if it ever came off on a new platform. Yeah.
That's kind of part of it. So there was the Capcom 5 that was 5 new Capcom games would be coming out uh exclusively for the Nintendo GameCube, and that was Beautiful Joe, Piano 3, Killer 7, I forget what the other one was.
Resident Evil
And I
4.
well, besides that, there was one that actually never came out for anything. It was canceled and never released. And Resident Evil 4. But alongside Resident Evil 4 coming out exclusively for GameCube, Capcom announced that all future Resident Evil titles would be coming out for GameCube.
Mm.
That announcement
That
might have
didn't
been
age well.
yeah. I think that announcement was prior to the Capcom 5 announcement, because following that, they proceeded to port Resident Evil 2, 3, and Code Veronica all to the Nintendo GameCube. And Resident Evil 0, which was in development for the N64, that shifted to the Nintendo GameCube. But before that would come out, their first original developed game for the GameCube, like straight up from the bottom up developed for it, was Resident Evil, a remake of the original Resident Evil, the game that we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
Which was the development time was just over a year. I think it was like a year and 2 or 3 months. But yeah, that game released for the Nintendo GameCube on April 30th, 2002 for North America. And it later got a remaster bundled with at roughly the same time. I think it was bundled together with Zero at first launch. For PS3, PS4, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and I think PC in 2015,
Mm.
which I think is largely the version we all played.
Yes.
So yeah, that was a really long walk, but there's a lot to talk about with the history of getting to this remake. I felt it was all kind of necessary to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the history lesson.
Thanks.
Sure.
The more you know.
The more do. All right. Final warning, we're about to spoil Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil Remake, as it were. So if you have not played the game, pause this episode, go back and play it, and then come back. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I got nothing to talk about, guys. No, I'm just kidding. There's a little bit we could talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. Coming into this game and trying to put the rest of the series out of my head and pretend like it's the first time I'm experiencing Resident Evil.
Yeah.
It did make it somewhat easier to take the story a little more seriously if it weren't for the execution of it.
Yeah. So expound on that. Like, what specifically about the
Just
execution?
the voice acting and the dialogue writing. I
Well,
mean,
I got new.
there are some great one-liners in here, man. I mean, like Jill just randomly being like "ciao," and
Yeah.
I particularly love at the ending, or not the ending, when you're introduced to Tyra and the reveal of Wesker and Chris. I played as Chris, and Chris just shouts, "You're going senile, Wesker," and it's like, where
Yeah.
the fuck did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. It's a lot easier to take this remake seriously when compared to the original. The reason the original game, it was decided to remake Resident Evil 1 from the ground up, is because even Capcom and Shinji Mikami kind of looked back on that game and decided this didn't really age well.
For those who
Mhm.
don't know, the original game had like live action cutscenes at
Well,
points.
it
Yeah,
had a live action cutscene at the beginning and at the end.
Mhm.
yeah,
Um and they were very, very cheesy.
yes, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
No, it in a way it kind of cemented what this series would be, even up to today in a lot of regards, but for the most part up through 4 for sure. Um
Yeah,
there's just lots of cheesiness
but like
strewn
you
about.
gotta know where you gotta have tonal consistency. So whereas four had the tonal consistency for the cheese, and so did some other entries in the title, I feel like here, given the design of the game and the atmosphere, the cheese didn't really fit in as nicely and stands out more.
Mhm.
I I would say maybe in the original iteration it maybe did, purely because the graphics were so rudimentary. Here, we'll talk about it more later. I actually neglected to put graphics as a discussion point on the notes, but I do want to talk about just how well this game holds up visually.
Yeah.
Yes.
The touched up pre-rendered backgrounds are just so gorgeous and so full of life and so full of detail, to a point where, and again, something that we might touch on later, I feel like playing remake, that's all you need to do to have like a definitive Resident Evil 1 experience, unless you're a diehard fan that really wants to experience the original PS1 iteration, just for the sake of saying you played it. I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um because Shinji Mikami and the team at Capcom were right. That game doesn't really hold up as well.
Mm-mm.
And we'll talk more about how well the remake has aged later, but I feel that has stood the test of time tremendously. Um, but
Yeah.
anyway,
I
oh,
was
go
just
ahead,
gonna
Delaney.
say quickly, Matt has a retro tank, and so he pulled up the original Resident Evil one in the mansion, the Spencer mansion, and then I had the remake side by side, and the differences are like so intense. Like I wouldn't recommend playing the first one, even as what I remember playing it when I was younger. I just remember everything being like red for some
Yeah,
reason.
red and orange.
Yeah, and then now everything is like just so many different colors, mostly like browns and blacks and stuff like that, but like you can actually make out what things are, whereas in the original you couldn't.
And it's like the details in the environments. It's like once Silent Hill came out, um it kind of ate Resident Evil's lunch in terms of in terms of location design and densely packing these areas full of tiny details and stuff.
Yeah.
Although later Resident Evils during that generation did start to pack in a lot more detail, Resident Evil or Silent Hill was really um upping the ante in that department. So this Resident Evil remake, uh and also like, keep in mind Resident Evil remake came out after Code Veronica did.
Mhm.
Code Veronica introduced for the first time in the series fully 3D rendered environments. But I feel like it's been like 1 or 2 years since I last played Code Veronica. Um, that game with its 3D environments, it's not as detailed as even Resident Evil 3 was.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to the pre-rendered backgrounds and upping the quality of them the way that this game did, it's really, really outstanding.
Yeah, totally.
Let's go back to the story.
Yeah.
We could talk more about the graphic. We could talk about the graphics all day, frankly, but let's go back to that later, maybe. Let's talk about the opening. The whole conceit of this game is something that there were killings kind of reported toward surrounding the Arklay Mountains, the Arklay Forest, just outside Raccoon City, and Bravo team goes to investigate, and suddenly they are it's radio silent. So Alpha team gets sent to investigate, and y'all get chased. The dogs
By
attacking
dogs,
both.
yeah.
Yeah, the dogs
Yeah, you
attacking
see the
both.
down chopper, and then the dogs chase you into the mansion.
It's really funny that I had to think about it for remake, because I feel like the opening cutscene for remake, since it's actually rendered in engine, instead of being live action, it doesn't sit as well in my memory as the live action one does, because it's just not nearly as dopey.
Right.
But yeah, okay, so it is roughly the same in both iterations. And you get like a heroic moment with Wesker in that cutscene too, where he like stops a dog from attacking Chris.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Chris, this way," and then they go jogging through the field into the mansion.
Yeah, as someone who played as Chris, there's definitely it's interesting as opposed to the Jill playthrough, the way, because they're just set up differently, but like they definitely try to play on Wesker has a soft spot for Chris.
Yeah,
And it's more prominent in the Chris playthrough. I mean, who did you guys play as, just out of curiosity?
both.
Oh yeah,
I played
you did
as
both.
Jill for a bit, and then I decided to go for the platinum, so I played as Chris, and then I decided not to go to the platinum, so I
Yes.
finished as Chris.
Yeah, we can talk about the platinum a little later.
Yeah.
Something I achieved, and man, I would not want to do that again. But
But I
yeah,
think had not that in mind, I would have picked Jill, but I did this playthrough as Chris.
okay. So you did play through as both, or
So I started as Jill, and I got up to the point where you need to get the key from the dog, and then I started playing as Chris.
got it? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And then you both beat it as Chris.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, so I'm the only one that can speak to Jill. Huh?
Well, I watched
I know, I
the Jill
wanted
stuff,
to.
and I vaguely remembered some of it from the past, but that was a long time ago.
Well, since we're talking about the story, it's funny. I would argue that Jill is at least in remake, Jill is the ideal storyline to see play out.
Yes.
I agree.
Because go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, especially because of the twist that happens with Barry.
Right.
Whereas
Whereas with Rebecca, it's like nothing.
Yeah, that's
Barry barely factors into the Chris playthrough. Yeah.
well, he's not present at
Yeah,
all.
you get the assault shotgun from him. He dies.
No,
In the Shark Tank.
that's from Richard.
No,
That's a different
wait.
character. That's
Hold
not
on.
Barry.
Richard sacrifices himself in the Shark Tank. I thought there was the dude that was like dying already when you get in there. Maybe I'm remembering it wrong.
That was somebody with an E, I think.
Maybe it was
he
Richard
was
who
there
dropped
like
the assault shotgun.
It's 100% not Barry. So Barry is an exclusive character to Jill's campaign. Rebecca is the exclusive character to Chris's.
Yeah,
So
I'm probably just getting it mixed up because I was trying to, when I was rewatching the Jill stuff, I was trying to remember where Barry shows up in the Chris one. I probably just got confused because he doesn't at all, really.
yeah, he doesn't show up at all. It's like there's like a couple other stars members that are there in the mansion. There's Richard. There's you find Kenneth early on, and he's the one that's being eaten by the zombie, and the iconic shot of the zombie turning around.
And then Enrico gets
which
Which actually, it makes sense because Rebecca, if I remember correctly, doesn't show up in Jill's either.
Right, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
Rebecca is exclusive to Chris, Barry is exclusive to Jill. And for that reason, that's why I feel that Jill is the ideal playthrough. If you're only going to play through the game once, you should play through as Jill, because Barry actually plays into the main plot in like any way. Rebecca is pretty inconsequential.
At least for
Mm.
this game, but I know she's like a bigger deal in Zero.
Yeah, she's the protagonist of Zero, and Zero kind of places her at the mansion at the end. So sorry, spoilers for Zero. It's a direct
Come
prequel.
on, Mark.
So.
Oh.
It's a direct prequel. It leads right in. It's like, I won't say anything more about Zero other than that's how the result of that game is how Rebecca winds up at the mansion. Um, but like, removed from that, she has no real bearing on the outcome of the game. She or plays much of a part in the story. Like, we could just talk about Rebecca's involvement in Chris's campaign, where if Chris gets bit by Yawn, the giant snake, like there's an instance where she can go get the serum in order to dispel the poison from him. And if that doesn't happen, then there's another chance where, since Chris is apparently too stupid to be able to do chemistry, um if Chris gets caught by Plant 42 in the guardhouse, if Rebecca's like, if she didn't have to help him with the serum earlier, she is a chemistry whiz and can mix up the V-jolt to go and weaken the plant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's almost like she doesn't really have much story. She's more of almost a gameplay device in some way, if you think about it, to make up for the fact that Chris has a more restricted inventory.
Hmm.
Yeah, but I wouldn't even go that far, because that would imply that she has more involvement than she actually does. There's only 2 scenarios where she really plays. Oh, 3 scenarios in which she plays in any importance. The 2 that I just described, and the fact that she can
Well,
play
she
piano.
she also heals you, so you get a
Can she
limited
heal
amount.
you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh.
when she's in the medical safe room, you get 3 uses of it. Whenever you come into the safe room, she'll say, "Do you need me to heal your wounds?"
Hmm.
Oh,
And you get 3
I
uses of
guess I'm
that.
just
Yeah,
too good at the game. I didn't know that. I never walked in there needing heals.
I mean, I didn't really need them either, but I just used them because I wanted to see
Okay.
like what. Yeah,
That's interesting. Well, what's ironic about that though is there's kind of like hidden stats attached to Chris and Jill, besides the inventory constraint on Chris, and Jill having an extra 2 slots. Chris is more durable and can deal more melee damage, whereas Jill deals less melee damage and is more easily
she also
um
moves faster, I think.
damaged. She might move a little faster. Yeah, I don't recall.
And even from a story perspective, I think her starting item is like the lockpick, whereas
Yes,
Chris's is the lighter.
That would be
And
because Jill is the master of unlocking.
yes, exactly, which makes more sense like canon wise because of how the mansion was built with like all these puzzles. It would make sense that they would send somebody who can like unlock all these crazy doors and solve all these puzzles,
I
whereas
don't.
Chris is just like a weapons expert or whatever.
I don't remember from a gameplay mechanic. Does the lockpick basically replace old keys?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. In the original PS1 game, the lockpick actually opened all sword key doors as well, so you didn't
Ah.
need the sword key as Jill. But in this iteration, yeah, the lockpick opens um all those locked doors that Chris requires an old key in order to open.
Hmm.
Mm.
So she can access certain areas more easily and sooner. But yeah, she doesn't have the handy dandy lighter on her at all times. So if you want to burn some corpses, you need to take up 2 inventory slots for that. Kind of a pain
Yeah.
in the ass.
But she also has a few more inventory slots, so it like kind of balances a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
much more pain in the ass to burn corpses as Chris. Just
Uh, I
that
don't
shit
know.
fills up. Well, if you're trying to play the game at like a speedy pace, like
I feel like it also does depend on your play style. Are you the type of person that always brings like reserve ammo with you, or always brings a healing item with
right.
you? And You
That's
know,
actually something I want to get into when we talk about gameplay, is like
okay.
gameplay style.
I am excited to talk about that. I feel like this is going to be an episode where we mostly talk about the game, how the game plays and its design and whatnot, than actual story.
Yeah.
But we'll, talk about get the story stuff out of the way first. Okay, so yeah, going back to Jill's playthrough, in my opinion, being the most ideal. So let's talk about the twist with Barry, and that's that he's kind of being forced by Wesker to play along and kind of hinder Jill's progress, I guess, and maybe even take her out. Um, when you, I guess neither of you got far enough in Jill's playthrough to get down to the Lisa Trevor room, huh?
Not as Jill, no.
Okay, but you guys saw the
Oh yes,
cutscene.
yeah. I saw the cutscene where she gives the gun back, or you
Well,
can
you can
choose. Yeah,
choose
yeah,
whether or
yeah.
not to give the gun back to Barry. She
Yeah.
snatches it from him because obviously she's a little untrusting of Barry. He's not been as helpful and kind of been dodgy, and some shady shit seems to be going on with him.
I love the first time they kind of like hint at it. Well, not hint at it. Like they pretty much overtly say it, where she overhears him through the door,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Will my family be okay if I play my cards right?" And then immediately after the conversation is like, "Barry, are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I just need fresh air. Sometimes I talk to myself." I'm like, "What the fuck
She ate
is
it
this?"
up.
Yeah, and then she says goodbye. She's like, "Ciao." I'm like, "What the fuck?"
You gotta love it. You gotta love it. Yeah, and I love during that cutscene, Wesker. I feel like Wesker's voice, because he's clearly talking to Wesker. Wesker's voice is kind of harder to hear. Kind of, it's lower and more muffled, so as not to give away the big twist that Wesker is the villain.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I guess let's go into that. Is how did we feel about the reveal that Wesker? I mean, it's really hard for
I was
us to
just gonna say it
remove.
goes back to the point that Jason made.
Yeah, like we are such storied Resident Evil fans that, obviously we knew going into this game. This wasn't my first Resident Evil game. My first Resident Evil game was 4. So I already knew Wesker had already been established as a pretty bad guy by that point. So it's really hard to remove ourselves from that. But as far as the reveal goes and finding out that he's bad, like how did you guys take that? How
I
did you
don't
guys view it?
think it was super impactful. One, because of the reasons you said, where it's hard to remove yourself, but also like they didn't really show much of him in the game for me to feel like, oh yeah, like no, he was definitely like he couldn't have been the villain. He was a good guy. He did this for me and that for me. Whereas Barry, like he did stuff for Jill, at least initially in the mansion.
You were almost
So
a Jill sandwich.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that twist for me, even though I didn't play as her, but I saw the cutscenes, like seemed more impactful than Wesker. He just like kind of shows up, looks cool, wears his cool shades, and then he says a line, and then you don't see him, and then you find
Yeah.
out he's bad. It's
J-
like, okay.
Wesker is not very present in the Jill campaign, but in the Chris one, it's not just cutscene. He has like one or two more cutscenes in the Chris one, but there's also other stuff like so when you get resupplies in your safe rooms, there'll be a note from Wesker like, "Hey, I left you some ammo."
Which
Um,
Barry does the same thing in Jill's.
yeah,
Mm.
but it's actually funny. I realized in this playthrough they actually spoil the twist if you're reading the notes, because Wesker's name is literally on one of the in the lab section. It's
Yeah,
on
and
one of the like the founder, like who's in charge of what.
Yeah, and they show a picture as well, and he's in the picture with
there's
Yeah,
the
the
Umbrella
yeah,
employees.
yeah,
there's the slide in the lab before you reach the where Tyrant's location is, and thus finding out about Wesker, and the one slide at the end that shows the Umbrella development staff.
yeah,
Wesker, it's very clearly the only slick back blonde haired man wearing sunglasses.
yeah.
It's Wesker. Like,
No, but as for the twist itself, like I said, I found it like I just found it funny and entertaining, and it helps that I was playing this game. I decided to have a few drinks while I was playing it this weekend. So like I drank a bunch of beers and whiskey. So like when Chris comes up, he's like, "Wesker, you're going senile," and then Wesker's just like, "Chris, you wouldn't understand." I was just laughing. I was having a good time.
Yeah.
So
That was a funny moment. Also, what was more surprising to me wasn't the fact that Wesker was the villain, but like the fact that he thought that the tyrant would just not touch him. Like
Yeah.
he
it's
let the
weird.
tyrant loose and got yeeted by him. And like, what did you think, bro? Like, did you think this was your homie that you were experimenting on?
It's weird because it plays out differently in the Jill cutscene. So in the Chris one, he's just like looking at it, he's like marvelous, and then gets fucking gutted.
Yeah.
But in the Jill one, he looks at it for a second and is like, "What, premature?" And then gets like slapped around because he's already shot, so he's already
Yeah.
like dying. I'm like, premature? What the fuck does that mean? Like,
Also, it's nice that it is a good thing that this remake exists, if anything, to kind of refresh the canon, because if I'm recalling correctly from my playthrough of the PS1 game that I did after finishing remake, Tyrant like impales through Wesker. Like
yes,
Yeah.
Wes like after seeing that and getting to another Resident Evil game, which I won't spoil which one, that reveals Wesker is still very much alive.
Mm.
That must have been super. Like, how the fuck did you
Yeah.
survive
right.
getting like a whole ass hole punched through your chest?
Yeah.
How?
Yep.
um,
Crazier things have happened in the Resident Evil universe.
Yeah.
this is true. We've yeeted boulders in a volcano before,
Exactly.
so. A game that maybe one day we will talk about. Um, but yeah, I going back, yeah, I Barry is really the reason I feel Jill is the more ideal way to play this game. But you
Yeah.
do
He
bring up a
also
good point.
Barry, just as a side note, Barry also, as opposed to Rebecca, like Barry actually kind of guides you through where you're supposed to be going at any given point in time in the game. Like he like the one example off the top of my head is when you're starting the game and you really don't know like which way you should be headed. Like he specifically says, "Let's stay on the first floor."
Yeah.
Whereas with Chris, nobody's even that. You haven't encountered anybody else yet.
Yeah, you get back to the lot there, the foyer of the mansion, and Wesker and Chris are just or Wesker and Jill are just totally
So
missing.
not only is Barry more interesting, he's also more helpful to like guiding you if you don't know what you're doing.
I will say it is kind of odd when everyone runs into the mansion on a Jill run, that Chris is just mysteriously missing.
Yes,
Where did he go? Like,
I
Yeah.
I was like genuinely confused watching that back. I was
it
like, wait a minute.
is that is kind of an odd one, I will say. And Jason, you do bring up a good point with Wesker being the one that leaves the supplies for Chris. That can kind of serve as a red herring as to the identity of the traitor among stars. Like, oh, it can't be Wesker, he's helping me out, like he's leaving me
Right.
supplies and shit. But I also do want to say that if we ever were to get another refresh of this title, even remove the fact that this game came out in 1996, if you're a fan, you know what happens in this game, you know that Wesker's a bad guy. I still would like to see more interactions between the characters in the interim, you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Run into Wesker in more random moments than just in the guardhouse once you're about to leave and he's just shooting flies in the fucking hallway,
Yeah.
and then
Oh my
tells you
god, dude.
something that you were already going to go do. Oh, there's more rooms at the mansion, you should go check them out again.
The bug
Like,
note, as a side note, as an experienced Resident Evil player, every time I heard those bug noises, I was just assuming there would be fucking bug monsters coming at me because like the same noise is used in like Resident Evil 4,
Yeah.
preceding like those like cockroach things, whatever they're called.
the Navistadors, I think
Yeah,
they're called.
Novistadors, whatever the fuck they're called. And like so every single time I was expecting to be attacked by bugs. And it
There
was like
are
mind fucking.
It always is funny and trippy to like even some of the door sounds in this game were carried over and reused in Resident Evil 4.
Yes.
Um which like isn't a bad thing, you know. Reusing certain assets and sound effects, there's no reason to do those over again if ones you've used before work perfectly fine.
Yeah.
um
It's almost like Final Fantasy in that way, where like weird things were brought forward from previous games and just became staples. Like,
yeah, but yeah, and there's no issue with it.
yeah,
It is funny though to think about, like they give you like anxiety because you're expecting, like, you hear like a sound and it's like, oh fuck, I think I know what's coming.
yeah.
um yeah, what else is there to talk about? Oh yeah, there is something more we got to talk about with the story, something kind of big that was actually removed from the original game, and was brought back and expanded upon in this remake. The Trevors.
The most interesting part of the story. Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah,
which is
very much so.
which is ironic coming from me as somebody who doesn't like having to read notes to understand a game story, which you technically don't for this
Yeah,
game.
but
But it
with Resident Evil, it's more in it's encouraged, and I feel like it is worthwhile. It is interesting
it's
because you get
world building.
it's yeah, it's like one of the earliest journals you can find, one of the earliest notes you can find is one of the people living at the mansion, like working there, and it's like the progression of him working and getting infected, and it's the famous one that ends with itchy tasty,
Yeah,
you know, that
Yeah.
that that it's one of the earliest notes that you can come across, and it's one of the most effective in being like writing or lore in this game that is actual legit horror.
Yeah, and
It's
it
really fucking
makes the
scary.
mansion feel scarier than it already looks,
Hmm.
artistic wise.
and it also gives like a more emotional impact to some of the things you see and what happens. And you know what I'm talking about in particular with Lisa and the Trevors.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the Trevors, because that is one of the biggest things that this game adds in terms of in terms of everything, in terms of narrative, in terms of story, because with the subplot, it winds up adding like several areas that were not in the original game. Going outside and kind of like in the cemetery and the woods and whatnot, up to that shack that Lisa inhabits, like that's not in the original game at all. That was totally new, added for this game.
Mm,
Um, and so going up there, and also the grave underneath the mansion when you're heading to the lab, like that's all new, and it's all tied in with this subplot. And we come to find out that George Trevor was the architect of the mansion,
right.
and Umbrella. Yeah, I guess we didn't really talk about why there's a fucking lab in the same game that we're talking about exploring a mansion, and that's that the mansion sits on top of a laboratory for the pharmaceutical company Umbrella, and they're doing experiments on humans, using these fucked up viruses, and the virus, you know, there's a contamination, or it breaks out and everyone gets infected and
Yes.
turns to zombies,
Hmm.
As tends to happen.
as tends to happen. Yes. Um. So yeah, and this has been going on for decades. This game takes place in July 1998. George Trevor, I think the notes involved with him after he designed the mansion were in like the late 60s.
Hmm.
So we're talking about 30 years prior to the events of this game. We're getting notes from this guy whose family, his wife and his daughter, were experimented upon.
Yeah. He
uh
had
con-
them go live there so that he can like do work there, and they wound up experimenting on them.
yeah.
And it's probably in terms of both the actual writing. I forget what there's like a technical literary term for stories that are told through like memorabilia and letters. I don't know. It's same kind of deal like with Dracula, how it's told through letters. It's not
Mm.
important, but the important part is that the writing for it is so much. It stands in such stark contrast to the writing of the dialogue for the main
Yeah,
characters,
totally.
and the actual story itself is it's a tragedy. It's
Hmm.
especially when what you see of Lisa in the game itself, and it has far more impact than anything else that happens in the game if you're
Yeah.
actually keeping up with the notes and reading it and being able to understand the context of what happens when you do encounter Lisa throughout the game.
Yeah. And the final boss fight against Lisa is I didn't realize this because I think I've always known what to do, but there is a note that actually
Yes.
hints at what you need to do during that fight, and it's because it's a note from Lisa,
Her
written
mom,
kind of.
isn't it?
I know it's a note from Lisa because she wants to see her mom, but the note, like, it's poorly written because Lisa's
Huh.
like mutated heavily and whatnot, but she's talking about wanting to see mommy,
Yeah.
but there's 4 stones blocking her path,
Yeah, I know
and
the
that's insinuating those 4
yeah.
stones you have to push off the platform.
I think I know the note you're talking about. I could have sworn though that the note in the coffin is her mother telling
Well,
them that they need
the
to
note in the
escape.
coffin is a different note.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is written by her mother.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, and it's like you don't even really defeat Lisa. You just let her be at peace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You give her you open the coffin to allow her to grab her mother's
Mother's skull,
skull, and
yeah.
then
And she shouts mommy as her mother as she jumps off.
I think the
And
only legible word you actually hear her say
Yeah.
throughout the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like
Yeah.
yeah,
mother.
yeah.
Not only
Um
was the story good from like a horror perspective, but also from like level design perspective, because like you said, when you go out to the shack you see her for the first time, and then when you go into the lab you wind up coming back up through that shack and you see the room that was like underground, and then you climb the ladder and you wind up back in the shack, and
yeah.
that's when you start to get to know more of like what was going through the mind of like of the daughter and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I thought that was like my favorite part of the game.
Yeah.
Period.
Same.
Yeah, and it's like it's the meatiest addition to this game. It's probably the most beloved addition to this game, um, and the most effective. So,
Yeah.
um, let's talk about Tyrant. We haven't really said much about Tyrant.
I mean, what is there to say?
Was he scary? Did he scare you guys?
He
Was
didn't
that fight stressful? The
he
one in
didn't
the
scare
lab?
me. So like, and we'll talk more about this when we get to gameplay, I guess. I had been running away and saving so much ammo that like I had like fucking 40 magnum rounds. So that fight was over in like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't even need that many. I think like
Five.
five
Five
shots
shots.
and
Yeah,
he's down.
exactly.
And then so okay, let's start with Delilah. Did you save Jill from the jail?
Yes.
Okay, and
Yes,
did
same.
you and was Rebecca still
Yeah.
Alive,
alive?
yes.
Cool. So we all fought Tyrant at the
We all
end.
got the good ending, yeah.
Okay. Well, if you don't, I think it's if you don't. It's not Chris and or Jill, but if Barry and or Rebecca aren't alive by the time you get up to the helipad,
Yeah, it's not the
uh,
perfect ending, yeah.
well, Tyrant doesn't show up.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You can get to and I did this on my director's cut playthrough. I played through as Jill on the PS1 director's cut, and I accidentally got Barry killed.
Mm.
I don't, and like the choices are so much more obtuse. Like clearly in the remake, if you don't give Barry his gun back, he's not gonna live because he's not gonna be able to defend himself.
Right.
In the original PS1 game, the choice was like you get to the caves and you can you can either follow Barry or you could let him lead into the caves, and like I had him lead and he wound up dying on me, and it kind of happened off screen. I just walked back into the main hallway of the caves and he's just laying there dying,
Mm.
and he's like, "I'm sorry, Jill, give this to my wife and daughter," and he hands me like a picture with a note on it.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
definitely, and we'll talk more about this in the gameplay section. It's definitely a game that is meant to be replayed,
Yes.
and the game mechanics are built on how much knowledge you have of the intricacies of the game,
Yep.
which I see as a plus, but we'll talk about it more later.
That's a design philosophy that carries into a lot of not even just Resident Evil games, but survival horror games in general. I mean, it's definitely a key part of Silent Hill. It's a key part of um other horror game. I think Outlast had like rewards for if you do it speedrun. It's a survival horror staple almost.
Yeah.
Because once when your first playthrough is all contingent on figuring things where things are and figuring out the puzzle solutions, well, replaying it, if you already know where everything is and what to do, what is there to do? To do
Yeah.
it as fast as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
And these games always lead into that. They give you extra rewards, special benefits if
Yeah.
you complete it
The
faster
game
the
can
next time.
theoretically be beaten under 3 hours. I think it's like the fastest is like a little over 2 or something like that. I don't know.
I played through on Switch, and I happened to just look at the leaderboards, and I saw people in the top slots on there that completed it in under like 25 minutes, and I'm like, there's no
Oh,
way.
wow.
That's physically impossible. Like, you can't, you just can't legitimately do that. But anyway, yeah, so you can get to an end state. Back to Tyrant, you can get to an end state where you do not face Tyrant on the helipad. You do not get the rocket launcher. You do not get to blow him into smithereens. And I think that like the worst ending of the game is you don't fight Tyrant and the mansion doesn't blow up.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, and I think in order to get that, you have to escape alone. So no companion and no
Right.
Chris or Jill saved.
Yeah, because you won't have somebody to deactivate the or
Right.
start those self-destructs. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, it's good to know that we all got to actually face the final boss.
Yeah.
As easy as it is when you have that much magnum ammo
With that awesome, when you finally get the rocket launcher, that awesome kill shot where like it zooms in on a rocket like 3 times, and it's like so like janky how the rocket's flying.
And you know what's fucking wild? On a repeat playthrough, I don't know if it's on a repeat playthrough or if you play through on a harder difficulty. I want to talk about this real quick before I forget. On a first playthrough, when you select new game and the difficulty options are masked as kind of like these weird questions, I thought I picked normal. I actually picked easy difficulty because I forgot there's a very easy and then easy and normal. They don't let you play on anything harder than normal your first time through.
Yes, I had the same experience where I thought I was playing on normal because I picked the one. It says you
It's
like
the one in
some
the middle.
challenge. Yeah, you like some challenge. Yeah, you would think like. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, you would think like I just totally forgot that there was a very easy difficulty added here, but yeah, you would think that the middle option would be normal with the top and bottoms being easy and hard respectively,
Yeah.
but no, I played through on easy on the first time. But anyway, I don't know if it's a repeat playthrough or a harder difficulty playthrough that gets this to happen, but when I played through as Chris the second time, I shot a rocket, it did the whole like pew, pew, pew. He fucking swats the rocket away.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a chance of him doing that on the harder difficulty. Yeah.
I didn't know if it was harder difficulty or the fact that I did a second playthrough on the same save, but yeah, he swats the rocket away, which is like a great way to keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if he does that, you can't just put your hands behind your heads, kick back, and watch the ending cutscene. Like, no, he's gonna fucking swat that rocket away. You got to be ready. It's a good thing that rocket launcher has 4 rockets.
Yeah.
But okay, we all got the best ending for our respective playthroughs. That's good. And you know, the ending, it's nothing crazy. It's really, really standard optimistic ending. It's just everyone's on the helicopter flying away. Brad finally gets his shit together and comes and saves you.
Jill falls asleep, resting on Chris's shoulder.
Yeah. When
Chris
are they gonna tie the knot, you know?
Yep.
It's 2022 and spoilers, guys, Jill and Chris still aren't canonically together.
Yeah, man. No. He's got another. He's got, what's her name? Sheva.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a character we haven't seen since 2009.
Chris is a player, man. He punches boulders. I mean, what are you gonna do?
He's got his good buddy Piers too. We want to talk about Resident Evil 6.
Still haven't played it. That might make for an interesting episode somewhere down the line.
Actually, yeah,
because I've never actually played it. I refused.
shout out in the comments if you want us to talk about Resident Evil 6. I mean, even if you do or don't say anything, I am going to push for that one day, I think, because I, after playing through that game multiple times, I do feel that 6 is actually a little underappreciated.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as bad as a lot of people say. But anyway, this isn't the show about Resident Evil 6. We'll talk about that another time. Yeah, it's a pretty optimistic ending. Everyone just you fly away. The mansion blows up, like it literally explodes, along with the lab, and you're led to believe that Wesker's dead, and the tyrant is destroyed. And I think the tyrant technically is destroyed. I think it's in a note that this tyrant is actually T-002.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Which implies there's a T-001.
Yes.
Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We did an episode, our very first episode of Reap the Spoils, on the remake of Resident Evil 2, so go check that out. If you want to hear
Yes.
us talk a little bit about Tyrant 1, T1.
Also interesting. I completely forgot about this. There is a note you can pick up and it talks briefly about the origins of the virus itself, where they found it, and it was originally found in France. So thank you, Frenchmen, for I don't know how or why this virus originally came from France, but it came
Well,
from France.
that does somewhat tie in with the greater Resident Evil lore, and minor spoilers for a game that we also did an episode on. That kind of ties in with what
To
happens in
four.
Village.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
true.
Village. Without I won't give much more away than this, and we can move on immediately from talking about Village after this. But yeah, Village does dive a little deeper into the origins of Umbrella as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, this is pretty consistent with that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there was also a note about the G virus, right?
Yes, that is something I did want to talk about. This was another addition. This was another addition to the remake. Um, it's a note that you find on Wesker's corpse, quote unquote, his body, from William Birkin, the obviously one of the main antagonists of Resident Evil 2. And it's him talking about the G virus and how like it's so much better than the T virus, and he's totally gonna own fucking Alexia Ashford, a character that was involved in Code Veronica. It This was such a funny note because it tries to tie in so many other Resident Evil games, more directly tries to tie in 2 and Code Veronica into this one like little note in this one little sequence.
Yeah.
But if you've played Code Veronica, it's so silly and kind of makes no sense. And it's also like, why would Wesker have this note from Birkin on his body? And in another Resident Evil game, there is like some minor interaction between William Birkin and Wesker. It's still just such a silly inclusion.
Yeah.
That is very baffling, and thank you for reminding me to talk about that, because it's very silly. It's probably the silliest thing in this game, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Is there anything else from a story perspective we want to absolutely bring up? I feel like some other stuff, like boss fights and maybe other story events, are probably going to play into our talk about the design and the mechanics and gameplay. So
No, I'm just the only thing I would say is, aside from the story about the Trevor family, um, I would encourage anybody who plays this game to, if they see one, pick up a note and read it, because there's some other much smaller things, just like random people who were either working in the mansion or, just interesting, tiny little short stories about individuals and how they were affected. Again, it's all better than the actual story of the main characters, and just adds a lot
Yeah.
to the atmosphere and makes it feel like a lived-in place.
what
Yes.
one thing we did neglected to bring up about the Trevors is the fact that George is like, his grave is like in between walls and rooms in like this very secretive
Yeah,
hidden spot.
where you find like a key item. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like like you find a note on his tombstone that kind of insinuates he was tricked into that room and left to die in it. And
Yes.
Mhm.
man, the whole storyline for that family is so fucked,
Yeah.
and it really is the best narrative portion of this game. um I can't remember if I finished this thought, but yeah, I would have liked to see more cross interaction between the like I don't think I brought this up. I do think it's kind of silly how it's kind of insinuated that Chris and or Jill are imprisoned at the very beginning of the game.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You know, like after Jill leaves, I guess Wesker just immediately takes Chris down to the jail and puts him in there. I would have loved to see, you know, Jill enter a room and Chris is there and they have some sort of interaction doing something, like Chris is doing his own independent investigation at the same time, you know?
Yeah.
Um I'm replaying Resident Evil 2 remake, and I I saw the cutscene between when Leon meets up with Claire again
Mhm.
outside the police station, and it's just something like that. Like I would have loved to see that in this game, where the two protagonists actually have more interaction than just at the beginning and at the very end.
Yeah. Or like not just the two protagonists, but all of the
Yeah,
characters.
all the characters, but especially Chris and Jill, because
Yeah.
they've always been considered partners, and they've always kind of been marketed and portrayed that way. But like in this game, where they're first introduced, you never really see them interact
Yeah.
until the very end, where you have to rescue the other one.
I'm kind
Yeah.
of torn on that. Like on one hand, for the purpose of like the main plot, I agree with you. It would probably benefit it. But given how short the game is and like the design philosophy and that atmosphere and isolation and the idea that you like they constantly refer to it as let me continue my investigation or I will investigate like as if like it's not a fucking zombie infested mansion like they're just policemen
Yeah.
doing an investigation, but like the idea that you're exploring and how even more so than two, I feel like this is so much more heavily there's a lot more emphasis on exploration and isolation. Um, like in some ways, not interacting with the characters except on special moments, beats throughout the game, almost feels like it's also a benefit. It's like a trade off. So like I could go with either or. Like
So maybe the way to do it so both of our desires are met is to you walk into a room, there's like the briefest cutscene of like, you know, you're playing as Jill, you walk into a room, Chris is there's like a brief cutscene, whatever, and you can optionally decide to communicate or talk to Chris, you know, about more
yeah,
things.
sure.
To just to give them more life, to give them more character and flesh out that relationship a little better, and not just the one between Chris and Jill, but like with all the other characters, right? What I ultimately was missing from this plot is Enrico is the one that tells you there's a traitor amongst stars,
Yeah.
and he tells you so late in the game. You don't find that out until you're in the caves, and that's basically when you're about to go on the final path and find out the big twist, you know, within the next
Yeah.
hour. I would have liked some more mystery earlier
Well,
amongst
you to be
the
fair,
stars members.
you get that with Jill. That's like that's more of a Chris
Yeah,
problem, yeah.
yeah, agreed. But like, I still would have liked to find out there's a traitor amongst stars. Maybe have more deliberation among the squad mates, you know.
Yeah.
More scenes with them interacting together to really showcase that there's some sort of mystery going on, there's some sort of betrayal going on, and have the player try to fill in the gaps from what they've seen, what they've known. And you know, that you could even add exploratory notes to kind of further that mystery, you
I
know.
think that would be the best way to do it is to have other characters communicate to you through notes left around.
Yeah, the problem is if they
If
were
you
to
miss
do
it,
that, huh?
or I was just gonna say if the player just misses it.
Well, no, that's not really an issue, because if to me that encourages and rewards exploration.
Mhm.
The problem is this game came out in 1996, and we all know the story.
Yeah, true.
You know, so it's kind of a moot point saying like, oh, I really wish this was there. Even if they were to remake Resident Evil again, like how much would that really do? But it still could be cool for new players that want to experience the game for the first time or don't know anything.
Yeah.
It would be neat.
Yes.
Okay, we can move on to other things, and if there's any more story beats that we want to touch on or any more story things we want to discuss, we can hit them. But yeah, why don't we talk about the game's design? And I definitely want to touch on something that Jason just said, which is more than other games, this game highly encourages exploration.
Yeah.
To the point where I don't really feel that we haven't gotten a Resident Evil game as exploratory as this one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, even thinking about the latest Resident Evil game, Resident Evil 8, it lends more to like backtracking to original areas more so than 8 ever did, like the way the lab connect, like you can go in and out of the lab through the mansion, the like outside area, and I never felt like I couldn't go back to an area that I explored, and in fact I had to most of the time, just to like loop around and open new doors in the mansion, or just like, I don't know, pick up items that I couldn't access or whatever. I definitely feel like other Resident Evil games try that, but not to this extent, because I feel like even the later ones always cut you off at a certain point from going back to where you were.
Yeah, and I was kind of taken aback when I first started playing, and it's just a matter of we perceive it now in 2022 as quality of life things, how games have quote unquote evolved. And it was kind of a shock, like only having 6 inventory slots. And at first, when I started playing the game, I'm like, man, this fucking sucks. Why didn't they just increase the inventory slots for the remake? And then you begin to realize that that is like part of the puzzle. This
Mm-hmm.
entire mansion is actually and all of the areas around it is actually much smaller than it seems. Um,
But it
but it's
feels
very, yeah,
huge.
it feels huge. It's an ingeniously, intricately designed puzzle. The entire area is a puzzle for you to solve. That is the game, is you solving the mansion and learning it so that you get to a point where you're not even opening the map anymore. You're just, you know which doors take you where.
Yeah.
And going back to what I was saying about the inventory, like if you added inventory spaces, that would actually defeat some of the puzzles in the game that like require you to have certain items all at the same time. And it's like a risk reward decision depending on what you're carrying. Do I carry multiple weapons? Do I carry extra ammo? Do I need a healing item? And it creates a lot of choice for a game. It's a deceptive amount of choice that you actually have in this game, and it's something you don't really see nowadays in game design. Where yeah, you're given choices that might have impact on the story, but every choice you make throughout solving this puzzle has an impact on the gameplay itself and how you
Yeah.
approach the rest of it. So, like, just an example off the top of my head, the first thing I did in the game was push the statue with the blue gem in the dining room down,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and I picked it up, and it fucked me for like the next 3 puzzles until I discovered a safe room with a chest that I could store the blue gem, because you don't need the blue gem till way later in the
Yeah.
game.
Technically, you don't really need it at all.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah, it. Um, I think it's no, no. It's I don't. The gem isn't required in the original either. I think it just lets you grab optional items as well.
But you get what I'm saying, more like
Yeah,
the choices are actually affecting your gameplay experience, and it goes back to it's a game made to be replayed to resolve that puzzle with the knowledge that you have built from previous playthroughs. And it's just something you don't see much nowadays in game design, where like
Yeah.
choices might have consequences in modern games, but it's usually either story related. It's not built into the gameplay loop. And it just,
Yeah.
as soon as I realized that within the first hour or two, like I was so taken aback and became so enthralled just because of that.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing about it that really messed me up is the doors opening for like 3 minutes every time, and every door is a loading screen. Like, had that been removed completely from the remake, or if it's ever removed from a future remake, if that ever happens, like it would make the game flow so much better in terms of what you're saying, Jason, with like the environment also being a puzzle. But
See,
because like if
Well,
I'm like, oh my god, I have too many items and I have these things I want to pick up, I have to go through all these doors and like spend like more time opening the doors and actually like getting to the item,
to be
dropping
fair,
them in the storage and
Delilah,
stuff like that.
to be
I think you're
fair,
just spoiled by that SSD
yeah,
in the
I mean,
PS5.
you listen, I put in my notes clearly spoiled by modern day lack of loading. But I mean, for every door, I don't know. It was, to me, it was very
to
frustrating.
be fair, that in and of itself is also used in the puzzle, quote unquote puzzle, as in navigating the mansion. Because some doors, if I remember correctly, if you use them too much, you can actually break the doorknob.
It was just like one door.
There's one specific door in
Yeah,
the east wing of the
it's
mansion,
basically like a fast access. It's a shortcut to one of the safe rooms, I think,
which
on that side.
in the latter half of the game it does get permanently repaired, but in the
Yes,
first half, when you're exploring the mansion, for the majority of the mansion, like that, the beginning of the game when you're first in the mansion, that's the majority of mansion exploration. So
right.
like it makes sense to make that kind of a limited use type thing. It's a really convenient entranceway,
Yeah.
and going through it doesn't affect the doorknob, but leaving to go back out to the one room that you came in from, that's when it'll start to, you start ticking down how many uses it has.
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
And I will say, like, even the door thing, like, as annoying as it was, sometimes it was helpful to like actually see the door and how differently it was designed, which you got a better view of in that like loading screen.
mhm.
Because that's what helped me kind of memorize like what doors led to what sections of the
Right.
mansion. But the amount, I mean, you see a speed run of this for like 3 hours. Chances are there was 2 hours of gameplay because the other hour is the doors opening and closing.
I'll also say I feel like the doors do create some semblance of suspense too.
Yes, because you don't know what's on the other side.
What's going to be on the other side of this door as it slowly and creaks open and makes noises, and you enter in this dark abyss until it loads in and you find out what awaits you.
Yeah,
It helps create some
it
suspense.
adds to the atmosphere because it's silent when the door opens, with the exception of like the actual door noise. And then if you pop into a room, there might be like that caution music that plays when there's a monster in the vicinity. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does add. I think, I wouldn't remove it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just
But
patient enough to withstand it.
yeah, I don't fault you for being annoyed about the doors. I don't.
But it's like
I
it's like I said
I
about the
just think in
inventory.
2022 we're getting spoiled.
Yeah, it's like I said.
Yeah.
It's like I said about the inventory. I had to like draw myself back to the '90s when we were playing games like this,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and understand that the inventory is designed the way it is to further, puzzle elements within the game itself.
It's also kind of a personal preference thing as well because of how I like to play Resident Evil games and especially newer Resident Evil games like with the remakes and 7 and 8 and
Clear
stuff
out
like
every
that.
room, turn them all blue.
Clear, I exactly, like I want to get every item, I want to kill every enemy in this game. Not only does the doors kind of take away from that and the lack of inventory and stuff like that, but also just the whole feature where you have to like if you kill an enemy you have to like burn the body for it to not like reanimate as like a crimson zombie or whatever. So there was like so much of this that just like and usually like I'll save my speed runs like leaving enemies alone or like not picking up everything and just picking up what's necessary for a hardcore playthrough. But every time that I play a Resident Evil game for the first time, I always want to clear. It just
Yeah.
like feels so good for me to do that. And there's so many mechanics in this game that stop me from playing the way that I wanted to play. And that was one of them, the doors and the
Yeah,
burning
see, I
body
was playing. I
situation.
was playing for like a good half of the game, almost the opposite, where unless I absolutely had to fight an enemy, I just ran. And by the end of the game, I had so much ammo. I had like 100 pistol rounds. I had like 40 or 50 shotgun rounds. I had all these Magnum rounds. I was just going Charles Bronson on the end of the game on all like the hunters and the bugs and whatnot that I knew wouldn't become what are they called, Crimson Heads.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And because I was Chris and I only had the 6 inventory slots, I didn't even bother using, with the exception of like right outside the save rooms, where you don't really want to have zombies there all the time.
Yeah.
I almost never had my lighter there to burn the bodies.
Yeah, I remember when I last played through Remake and got the platinum. This is like 5 years ago or so.
Hmm.
I remember burning a lot more of the bodies. This time, I really did just like there was so much fuel left in all the containers throughout the game because I burned the ones outside the save rooms into the critical paths leading to the save rooms. But for the most part, I just didn't bother because I wanted the slots.
Yeah,
And if I wound up getting a crimson head, I could deal with it. There was
yeah.
enough ammo that I could handle it and not lose too many resources or too much time or health to it.
Also having like again, this goes back to repeat playthroughs and game knowledge playing a part in the gameplay loop. Knowing that if you time it right and risk letting the enemy get closer, you get that increased chance of headshots. So when I had to
Yeah.
kill enemies, most of the time I was blowing their head off. Like,
Yeah, that's a skill that I never like acquired for my playthrough of this because I just hated like the fixed camera angle with the like up down aiming. I personally prefer like the Silent Hill style where you just shoot and it does the job, whereas this one you do have to like gauge your distance from the enemy versus like where you're pointing your gun, because you could point your gun, your knife, whatever, up, middle, and down. And I just never like wrap my head around how that functioned. I got a few headshots, but for the most part I couldn't just do it on command. Like it was almost as if I was lucky. And because of that, like if I was to ever play this again, I wouldn't even kill the enemies. I would just walk by them, and then they wouldn't reanimate into crimson heads unless of course there was like a bunch of them that was like by a key area that I needed to
right.
access.
So it's interesting you bring up Silent Hill because I would say, um, early Resident Evil and Silent Hill's gameplay are about as equally as complex, just in completely different ways.
Hmm.
Where Resident Evil, you can try to like aim a little bit by going up or down, and that'll do different things depending on what gun you're using, your elevation, and so on and so forth. Silent Hill is pretty much just aim and shoot, but you can also move while aiming in Silent Hill.
Right.
And
Yeah.
melee combat is also much more fleshed out in Silent Hill.
Hmm.
There's lots of different melee weapons, and it uses the analog buttons of the PlayStation. So like a harder press will have Harry like do an overhead like smack.
Yeah.
Whereas Resident Evil, you have a knife, it stabs things. It's
Barely.
not gonna do much.
Which I only used once at the one occasion that the game requires you to have it, and it even gives you another one because it knows you're probably not carrying the
Yeah,
knife.
I do find that really funny where you enter the room with Black Tiger, the big ass tarantula, and they have a knife waiting there for you just because they probably figure there's no way you have your knife on you and you're not going to run back to the item box to get it. Here, just have another one.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that they did that just to make it easier on the player.
Yeah, but
The other
oh,
Go ahead,
sorry.
sorry.
I was
No, no,
just
no, go
gonna
ahead, go
say,
ahead.
there's all kinds of cool like stuff that you learn about different parts of the mansions, where it becomes a character in and of itself. Like, there's that one hallway where famously the dogs jump through the wall,
Yeah.
but it's only if you walk through the hall in a certain way.
I
So
think it's just when after a certain point when you walk through that hallway, the dogs will actually come crashing through.
I see, but I
Um,
never walked through after that, and maybe it's because I knew what I was doing. So like, I knew you don't need to go through that hallway again.
yeah,
Yeah, it was that
Yeah,
same hallway with the door that breaks, I think.
and it's on the way there. It's
yeah,
not
Yeah.
it's not quite the same hallway, but it's after the room with the big sculpture in the center that has the map in the urn.
Yeah.
It's after you
Yeah,
go
yeah,
through
yeah.
that room that there's that hallway. Something I want to talk about that I absolutely love, and that's how we talk about how this remake kind of expanded on the narrative and kind of breathed new life into it with like new things like Lisa Trevor. This remake also refreshes the original game in like the best way, where not only does it add like new areas and new things that you need to do, like there's so many new rooms, and the mansion layout, while it still has that east wing west wing layout, there's so many new rooms, and ways to navigate the mansion in the remake versus the original, that you're basically learning a whole new map, and it didn't translate, is what I'm trying to say. When I played through director's cut after playing remake, I had to kind of relearn what I was doing because the map layout wasn't 100% the same. Like,
Right.
it was largely the same, but it wasn't 100%. There were so many new rooms in remake that kind of changed the layout and offer like new shortcuts, different paths. But what I appreciate most of all was how they kind of fuck with the players that obviously played the original coming into remake. You walk into that hallway in the original PS1 game with the dogs and they immediately jump through the windows. You
Mhm.
walk through that hallway in the remake and the windows just crack a little bit
Yes.
Yeah.
and nothing jumps through, and that's like such a perfect way to fuck
The
with the player
fans.
that have, yeah, like people that are familiar or intimately familiar with the PS1 version. They come in with a certain expectation and it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Something happens that kind of fakes you out, and I think that's so clever, and it eventually does happen, right? You do go through that hallway, you can go through that hallway again and the dogs will jump through. So you
Yeah.
do eventually get what you're expecting, but they kind of fake you out, and I really, really love that.
Or if you
Yeah.
forget what you're doing and you go back through the way you came,
Hmm.
the dogs will immediately jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just do so many clever things to kind of fuck with people that are familiar. And to people that are playing this game for the first time, it doesn't really matter to them. But the people that did play the PS1 game, like it's I just love how
Mhm.
it kind of messes with them. And that it doesn't just end there. It also, um after playing remake and playing the PS1 version, like items that were in a place and I expected them to be in the same place in the original, they weren't. They were in
Hmm.
different locations, and I had to, kind of change my structure and my priority and where I was going and what I was doing, because they did with all the new rooms that they added and the new things that they added that you have to do, with remake. Like, they had to change the structure
Mhm.
quite a lot. Um, for instance, like the death masks, that wasn't a thing in the original game.
Mm.
And the stone and metal objects weren't a thing. In order to leave the mansion and go on the way to the guardhouse, you actually had to get a sun, moon, star, and wind crest,
Mhm.
and those are all in the remake as well, but they have a completely different purpose. The wind crest, um that lets you unlock the other three crests that you can then put onto a tombstone
For the
to get
Magnum.
the
Yeah.
revolver.
Yeah.
But that's not how you get the revolver at all in the PS1 game. Like, the way they reshuffled and restructured everything to make it a very familiar but also a very fresh experience for returning players, it's remarkable to me. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
really
Um,
cool.
we talked about the Crimson Heads, and I as frustrating and surprising and difficult as they are to deal with, I think it's a brilliant addition.
Mhm.
Um, Jason, you talked about about the quality of life and how they could have just removed the inventory spaces until you realize, like, that's part of the design, is limiting that inventory space. Crimson Heads kind of play into that in the sense that you could kill a zombie, but if you don't fully get rid of it, it's going to come back and be even stronger. So it's like you have to. There's so much decision making, that goes past just like what you bring with you and what you grab in certain rooms,
Right.
because it also comes down to what you decide to eliminate. Um, and like you touched on that. You touched on that by just, when you said you were avoiding mostly zombies so they wouldn't come back as Crimson Heads, and that's a viable strategy.
Yeah.
Um,
It also just gives you more ammo for the end of the game and makes it a whole lot easier.
This is true, but I will say, on even normal difficulty, I wasn't hurting for ammunition by the end, even
Um,
with being
Yeah.
pretty liberal with it.
Same with healing items. Like, one of the reasons I didn't clear, because this game doesn't let you discard items from your inventory once you pick them up.
Yeah.
So I was almost never in need of healing items, and I didn't want to pick them up because I knew I needed inventory space. So there's basically just, I left a shit ton of herbs all over the place in the mansion.
Yeah.
So it's like I have all these red rooms on my map because they're just, I know there are healing items just sitting there.
Yeah, and I did the same approach that because I'm just like the Delilah. My first playthrough, all those rooms have to be blue by the end.
Yeah.
If there's a room that's left red, I need to go pick up whatever ink ribbons are left in there or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, But on my second playthrough, yeah, I just left herbs and whatever else lying around because I kind of feel that a lot of times the developers felt like you don't need to grab these and take them with you. Like if you reach this room and you need health in a pinch, it's here. And if you
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't need health, just leave it and you know where it is and you
and
can come
they're
back and
pretty
grab it.
strategically placed. The healing items are. So like there was one instance in the game where I forgot that the snakes could poison you, and I was wondering
Mm.
why I was losing health. So like it actually created, and the tension there is nice because I was running around and I didn't know if I would encounter like a zombie or not because I'd left so many alive. But yeah, I had to like look at my map, find a red room that was the closest to me, and then navigate there, trying to avoid any extra damage because the poison won't kill you; it will just bring you down to like the lowest health level possible.
I thought it would kill you. It doesn't kill you?
No, it
Oh.
only it keeps you at the lowest health, so you'll basically get killed by any monster in one hit.
Mm.
Okay. Um that's good to know because when my first playthrough was Jill, Yawn kicked my ass a little too much and poisoned me, and I it was a very stressful run back to
I
the
think yawn.
medicine
I
room.
think yawn might be different though. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
maybe.
I'm talking about like just the general poison you can get from like the snakes outside and
Well,
whatnot.
Right.
Yawn still does poison you, or
Yes,
can still poison you.
I
I
think
would imagine
yawn's.
it stays the
I
same.
think yawn's maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure because I never got poisoned by yawn.
It's I would say for Jill it's probably functions the same. With Chris, since Rebecca, you can do the sequence where Rebecca goes to get the serum for Chris. Maybe that's a little different. If you don't do that fast enough, maybe Chris dies and you get a game over.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
With Jill, it was just a very stressful, careful run back to the medicine room so
Yeah,
I could heal that poison. Because holy shit, I hadn't saved in a while and I got really
Oh
fucking nervous.
man.
kind of like the what was it? What's it called? The fuel pod in the laboratory where I was
Yeah,
expecting the game to throw stuff at me, but it turned out I'd blown the heads off everything in the hallway. So like it
yeah.
was just a really boring, slow walk where I was like, "Is the game gonna throw anything at me?"
I think it's because you like it doesn't explicitly spell out like, hey, when you grab this, you can't run or it will explode. So it's kind of like, all right, how careful were you in clearing out these hallways and making sure that it's gonna be a smooth ride?
Yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
so it doesn't require you, it doesn't test you once you've done that. It tests you before you've done that and kind of your preparedness of that moment.
technically you can run, but depending on what difficulty you're on, you can only run for a certain amount of time before
Mm.
the thing
Man,
explodes.
I'm not risking that shit.
So like I think it's like on normal, it's 4 or 5 sec. No, it's like 3 or 4 seconds, and then on hard, it's 1 or 2 seconds. And then on easy, it's like 5, 6 seconds before it
Okay.
explodes. So you could do like runs in short bursts if you were really like knowledgeable of the game.
There's actually one point I want to make in terms of difficulty modes. Like, I feel like just Resident Evil as a whole, no matter what difficulty you play, the first one feels like what later games created as their hardcore modes, where you have to like use ink ribbons a certain way,
Yeah.
like be careful about like when you use them, or even like being mindful about which enemies you should or shouldn't kill. Whereas in other Resident Evil games, you could kind of just go like balls to the wall and kill whoever you want, however you want, wherever you want. Whereas here, like you said, it's all like a puzzle. Like you have to figure out like which zombies you're gonna burn so that they don't become crimson heads, which ones you're gonna leave alone, and it just becomes like a lot more strategic, which is what I'm used to doing on hardcore modes in other Resident Evils. But moreover, with the difficulty, I'll say I started on easy to do a knife only run with Chris, and I
Mm,
did it until I was gonna go for the platinum, and then I was like,
yeah.
nah, f this, until I hit the dog. And with the dog, it's almost impossible to hit the dog with the knife unless you stand in this corner, because the dog, even on easy mode, can one shot you if it like jumps on you.
Yeah.
And you can't get out of it. There's nothing you can do about it, until eventually I found that if I stand in a specific corner, I could like time it so that the dog jumps, and then I could knife it a few times, and I had to repeat that. But I had to stand in that corner. It wasn't a matter of like, oh, this is easy mode, I can like get away with getting hit a few times, heal with the little, herbs that were there in the side, and like keep stabbing at it. Like, so I didn't feel like there was a difference there. And I finally got the key, but the part that I hit the roadblock and just decided to use my weapons was with the Crimson Head. I literally spent like 10 minutes fighting this thing, just
To
like
be
circling around it, stabbing, circling around it, stabbing the Crimson Head in the coffin when you use
Yeah, I was about to say, to be clear, the prototype one, that's
the yeah,
yeah.
where after you put the different masks on the wall, which
Mhm.
that section of the game really cool looking, like very creepy.
Yeah.
Um I kept like circling around, knifing, circling, knifing. I did that for 10 minutes and then I died because like I like didn't circle properly. And then I looked up a video to see if it was me and I'm just whack. And like even on easy mode, you have to do that for like 20 minutes. And that's when I was like, no, this is like if it's easy mode, like I should be able to stab it a few times and it should go down. Like, yeah, maybe not as fast as regular zombies or whatever, but it should
Mhm.
at least go down faster, in my opinion, on easy mode than it did.
I don't remember it taking that long. It's admittedly been a long ass time, and I don't remember it being easy by any stretch of the imagination. But
Yeah,
um,
you know, I remember because Resident Evil 4 is one of my favorite games of all time, and I remember the not divisiveness because it was a pretty universally praised game, but there were some hipsters. I don't want to call them hipsters because of what I'm about to say, but there were people,
detractors.
there were detractors going, "This isn't Resident Evil," and for a long
Still to
time,
this day, there are people
yeah,
doing that, saying that.
and for a long time, I didn't really understand it until I went played this game on GameCube, and I get it, like because they are very very different games unless like Delilah you pointed out the hardcore modes on the more modern Resident Evil games. But I also
Yeah.
like with that knowledge now I do respect to a degree and understand what they're saying. Like
Yeah.
it's almost two completely different genre of game, and the depth and complexity of the overall design in this, like it, not to say that Resident Evil 4 isn't complex, but it's different in how it's complex.
Yeah, and you know, the writing was frankly on the walls for the shift of design of Resident Evil 4. Um, the final stretch of Resident Evil 1 is very linear. You know, the exploring the mansion is not linear whatsoever. You're given a key. There's a ton of rooms you can open with that key. Eventually, you have to get another key. Ton of rooms to open with that key, and it's all up to you what order you tackle them in. You don't even have to tackle all of them. There's some rooms that are totally optional, but you don't know which ones those are on your first playthrough.
Yeah.
It's like we talked about how this game is very focused on exploration. It absolutely is, to the point where, you know, it didn't the combat is very very simple, and that's okay. It didn't need to be any more complex than it was, because that wasn't the focus of what this game is trying to accomplish.
Right.
Yeah.
It wanted to test you on your exploration skills. It wanted to test you on your inventory skills, your inventory management skills. It wanted to have you focus on decisions of what to bring with you, not um do I, you know, I mean, killing enemies in a room is a strategic decision, but it didn't focus on the killing. It focused more on just, do I take these guys out so it's easier to get through here when I have to pick this and this up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
um and with 2, we lost a lot of that exploration.
Yeah, it's two is definitely where you start to see that the complexity goes to the encounter designs more than the
Speaking very
puzzle.
broadly,
Yeah,
the police station is not as large as the mansion. It doesn't have as many rooms, and the keys that you get don't open as many rooms as the ones in 1 do. 3 is there's lots of backtracking in 3 through the streets, and I'm talking about the PS1 iterations, not the remakes, although
Mhm.
some
yeah.
of this
Three
does apply to the remakes as well.
three was pretty gimmicky at the time.
3 was very gimmicky, but was still very linear. You'd
Yeah,
get, and by linear I mean you'd get dropped into an area that had some exploration, but you'd eventually move past that and go to a new area that had some exploration, and go past that to another area that would have some exploration. But it's like still sequence after sequence after sequence. Whereas this, you have this massive hub that you spend a very big chunk of the game exploring. Eventually you do move on to new areas, but like even the guardhouse, you have to go back to the mansion. It still feels like you're in that hub, not moving forward, just moving around to get yourself further in that area. um and that even the return to form with 7 that a lot of people were saying about 7 being kind of a return to classic Resident Evil, not entirely. It's
Yeah.
still not as big, it's not as much that you're exploring, and you still do move forward to areas that are points of no return.
Mhm.
Um, they're
Yeah.
real one's design has never really been fully replicated, except for, obviously with Remake, where it was not only replicated but expanded
Yeah.
in some great ways. And I didn't bring up Code Veronica or Zero, and that's because they're the exact same as 2 and 3. It's very much you move on to the next area, you're locked out of the previous one, and
Mhm.
it's not as much to explore, get lost in, and navigate. They're much more linear. Um,
Yeah.
but just to talk a little more broadly and briefly about 4, where 4 drops that exploratory the exploratory design, because it takes a much bigger emphasis on combat, which 2 and 3 also started to do. So what I'm long-winded saying is that the progression of getting to 4 was very evident in 2 to 3 and then 3 to 4.
Mhm.
Even if you want to throw Code Veronica in there, you could, and I would still say it applies.
Yeah, and I also understand like where those people are coming from, because after 4 it just went like balls to the walls action, where like the horror just wasn't even there, whereas in 4 it was still there, but like 5 and 6, at least from what I've experienced, there's just nothing scary about the games. It just feels like a shooter kind of.
This is a conversation for another time, I would
Yeah.
say, when we inevitably do an episode on 5, a game that I love, by the way,
Same. I
but
love 5. Yeah.
but I do firmly believe that you lose a lot. You lose a lot of atmosphere, and you lose a lot of ability to convey a horror experience when you make that experience cooperative.
Yeah.
As soon as you start playing with someone else, and you're not just focused on the game and the atmosphere it's giving you, but communicating with your partner and talking, just idle chit chat, how was your day, that stuff takes away from being able to soak yourself into a horror environment.
Yeah.
um
I think it happened with Dead Space as well.
yeah, from what I understand about that series, yes, for sure. That's a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
There was a few more things I wanted to talk about with this. The puzzles. Let's talk about the puzzles. Were there any you guys got stuck on? Any? How was the puzzle design of this game?
Because Jason mentioned how like the entire mansion is basically a puzzle, I would say I just got stuck on figuring out like what items were relevant to pick up at what points, like which one should
Okay.
I bring into my inventory. So once I've like found the thing and I was like, oh okay, I can use like the freaking soil on this machine or whatever, or I could put this gem inside this eyeball, then I was fine. I can't really think of a actually I'm I don't know. I feel like the stained glass puzzle was really easy. I feel like
Mm,
the night puzzle was pretty simple. Um, same like the whole one where you had to get the second key. I was like, what do I do without getting crushed? Until
yeah.
I found the fake key, and that was basically just the whole vibe. Like once you found the thing that you needed to get through the thing, it was fine. But it was just figuring out like you had to find the thing first, and then you could figure it out.
And sometimes it becomes a question of which thing do you find? What do you find first? The path forward that's blocked, or the item to unlock the path forward?
Yeah.
You could get the dog whistle and get the little token out of the collar before you find out the room where the shield key is,
Mhm.
and or no, sorry, the armor key, and just look at this thing like, what the fuck is this for? I don't know what it
Yeah.
is. Or you could get to
Exactly.
that room where as soon as you pick up the armor key, the thing starts spinning, coming towards you. And it's like, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, what do I do? What do I
Yeah.
do? What do I do? It's
Yeah.
like what it's interesting to it's interesting. Delilah, this was your first time ever playing this game, right?
So I played it when I was younger, but
Okay.
When you're younger, you just like run through things and pick things up, and you don't really like do the brain work. So this was my first time playing it where I was like actually doing the brain work.
Okay, so yeah, this ostensibly was the first time because
I would say, yeah.
I assume you didn't remember anything from that original playthrough.
No, just red and scary. That's
See,
all.
I it's really hard to remove myself from this game because I've played it at least 10 times now, probably more. So I started my playthrough as Jill and I just went on autopilot. You know, it's
Hmm.
very difficult to remove myself now from I forgot where a few things were very briefly, but it was overall just like, oh, I have to go get the other half of the music notes. I know that that's in the room right by where the room where you fight Yawn, so I got to go there. And there were a lot of times where I'd go in there and I'd be like, oh fuck, I needed the lighter because it's dark and she can't see anything in the dark. So I gotta
Yeah.
go. Like that was the most that happened for me this playthrough, or this time around. But
In
it's
terms
hard
of
to
the
remove myself.
self-contained puzzles, I can't really think of any of them that gave me trouble. I thought they were all pretty straightforward, but that's because I feel like those kind of puzzles have been present in other Resident Evil games in some way, like matching colors or like I don't know, like looking at a image and then figuring out what the pattern is of the image or something like that.
What was your guys' favorite puzzle? Out of
My
curiosity.
favorite one is simultaneously the only one I had trouble on, and it had nothing to do with figuring out what to do. It's the puzzle where the two walls start closing and you have to push that statue to the left.
Oh yeah,
You have to
okay.
run around, press the
Yeah.
button, and then run back. And it's not that I didn't know what to do. The only reason I had trouble on it, and this pissed me off for like a good 10 minutes, was because of the way the camera switches as you
Yeah.
run back from the switch.
So
Sometimes the game will decide that whatever direction you're pushing is now to go back. So for
well,
like 10 minutes, I had to like carefully plot how I was going to press to run around fast enough in time to push the statue back.
that's
Yeah.
an important thing to talk about that we have not talked about with regards to old Resident Evil games, and that's that they used tank controls.
Yes.
And Remake added, I believe even the GameCube version had this. It had added the ability to control your character with the analog stick, so you did not have to use tank controls. But the problem, the thing about tank controls and the reason why these games used those is because of the fixed camera angles,
Mhm.
Yes.
and they would change. You'd go 5 steps forward and the camera angle would change.
Yeah.
Tank controls always mean you're always moving relative to where the camera is, right? You
Yeah.
press up, the camera angle changes, you're still going the same direction. It's not going to change unless you stop pressing up.
Hmm.
With the stick controls, if you don't move the stick whatsoever, they'll actually keep running in that direction, but you have to be very careful not to move the stick.
Yeah.
um and it's it's convenient to use the stick controls in a pinch just because it's easier to navigate than with tank controls, where you have to move left and then move forward, or move right and then move forward. I just moved left and right the wrong ways, for
Mm.
for you guys. Audio listeners don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, um the stick controls are nice, but I had the same problem with the exact same puzzle, Jason. I had to redo it multiple times because I kept using stick controls and I needed to internalize in my head, like, no, for this specifically, use tank controls because it's going to make it so much easier with all these angles that are changing on me.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm just coming to the defense of tank controls a little bit because there is a reason that's
Right.
what they were used for so
There was
long.
utility to it. Yeah.
Yeah, there like it was the best solution for the pre-rendered backgrounds and the fixed camera
And
angles that we
especially
used.
because it's such tight corridors and really sharp turns when the camera switches.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's not like you get if going back to that era of the pre-rendered backgrounds. It's not like a Final Fantasy game where you have this large panning picture, um,
Hmm.
and you're generally walking on straight paths. Here, it's like you're going around a corner and the camera will shift like 3 times.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they're placed really strategically, so you never you never necessarily turn a corner and are completely blindsided and surprised. I mean, it can happen, you know, you can turn a corner and a zombie immediately grabs you. But they are placed strategically enough for the most part so that you never run into those surprises. You can always turn a corner and know what's gonna be there that you have to face.
Yeah.
Mm,
I really like that that one room. It's like very early in the game after you go upstairs for the first time, and it's a hallway that connects to another winding hall. It's where you get the arrow,
Mm.
and there's the one connecting hallway that has the mirror that lets you see down that other hallway from that same camera angle.
yeah.
Something
Mhm.
I really appreciate with regards to this conversation.
Yeah.
Delilah, what's your favorite puzzle?
I guess I don't know. Maybe the stained glass one, just like looking at the little like jewels on the girl and the picture, and then making sure that the different pictures were the same color as her jewelry. That I don't know. It was alright.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah.
I really like the V Jolt one. Um,
Oh, with the shark?
yeah, well, well, that's actually a good one too. Having to depressurize the lab
Oh,
and drain the water. I actually did like that a lot.
are you talking about the one where you have to make the thing if you don't have Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm talking about
Yeah.
yeah, where you have to mix the chemicals to make Vigil to then to kill. That's actually not a required puzzle. You
Right.
can
That's what I'm
not
saying. I
do
didn't have
that.
to do it on my playthrough because I had Rebecca alive.
Okay. Yeah, you mean you never actually have to do it. But it helps the Plant 42 fight. Um
Hmm.
and I always like doing it cuz it's just fun. You get to do some chemistry. It's enjoyable. Feels like
Yeah.
Breaking Bad up in
I don't
there.
know. I didn't die to any of the bosses. Did you guys?
No, I actually didn't die at all on my first playthrough, and then I realized that I played through on easy on accident, so
Right.
that was why.
Yeah, I didn't die to any bosses, just dogs and crimson heads.
Yeah. Delilah's clearly your favorite enemy was the dogs.
Yeah,
I heard
I
you love
hated
those
it so
guys.
much, dude. I mean, part of it was because I was doing knife only. Once you get the shotgun, they're fine.
Yeah.
But because I was trying to do knife only, it became a nightmare.
Yeah.
So even when I was playing as Jill, I didn't have the broken shotgun to get the shotgun, so I was using the pistol, and it's impossible to like shoot those things.
Well, the
Yeah.
nice thing with Jill is you don't need the broken shotgun to get the shotgun.
So I did for some reason, and I looked it up because I thought that I was making. Well, okay, so I thought I was making it because like Barry's supposed to come and help you, right?
Yeah, he's supposed to come in and
He
save you.
didn't come and help me in my game,
Huh.
and I have no idea why that happened. So
Maybe there's a stopping point where like he won't come and help you
probably,
anymore if
yeah,
you
I
do it
think
too late.
so.
Okay.
Either that or you didn't trigger a cutscene, or maybe you did trigger one that did cut it
I
off.
think
Yeah.
I may have triggered a cutscene before I was supposed to trigger it
Okay.
or something like that. But I don't know what the exact trigger is, but I did notice that in looking it up that I just didn't get access to it without doing
Because
like the
there's
whole broken shotgun thing.
yeah, because I know in the Chris playthrough there's like a cutscene or there's a way you can solve it, but you'll lock yourself out from getting the shotgun
Hmm.
completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, not to brag, but I actually only died once in this entire playthrough, and it was because I accidentally in the beginning of the game walked out the mansion front door because I thought
Oh,
I wasn't paying attention, and I thought it was the double doors on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And you get attacked by dogs if you open the mansion front
yeah.
door.
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah,
I was gonna say something else about the dogs. I'm trying to remember what it was, but I can't.
but also keep in mind I was playing like a coward and just running away from everything that I could. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
once stopped with the knife only and ran away from the dogs, I was fine. I just dodged them most of the time, except for like the ones that were blocking doors. Oh, I was gonna say for puzzles, I like the mask one too, where you had to match the mask like with the different like see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil
Yeah,
kind of thing.
and that one really plays into what you guys were talking about with like the mansion itself being a giant puzzle because you have to that's like one of the first objectives you're given is to go find these four masks and they're all obtained in wildly different ways and in wild and different places throughout the mansion.
yeah, you're
So
basically getting them if you're playing the way the game kind of funnels you to play. you should be acquiring them over the course of acquiring other items to solve other puzzles and unlock other
Yeah.
areas.
Yeah.
So you really just get to a point where like eventually you just have all four.
Like you're eventually gonna go through to get all the masks, you're gonna go through the sword, the armor, and the shield keys all in the process of getting the
Right.
masks.
Yeah.
Because ultimately you need the shield key in order to reach Yawn, which has the last mask.
And it is a testament to the game's design and how it doesn't tell you explicitly what to do, but once you get on the track, it kind of funnels you by the way it locks off certain parts and other parts unlock.
Yeah.
I think one puzzle that I actually might like more than the stained glass one is the one with the spiders and the pool table. And you had to like look at you had to read a note to know that you had to look at the pool table balls to know what order the eyes and the like candle things were. And so it
Yeah.
was like you had to look at multiple things in order to solve the puzzle, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, that one was only frustrating because I had to like. I think I wound up taking a screenshot of a few things, so I didn't have to run back to the room to
Fair.
figure out. Not a bad puzzle by any stretch. There's a puzzle that I like. It's just
It's
um
one of the few I wrote in my notebook for.
yeah. Like you have to. It's something you should take screenshots of or write down for sure.
Yeah.
Um, there was another puzzle in the PS1 version that was like that, where I had to take a picture of something so that I didn't have to keep switching back between two things. It was a little frustrating. Oh,
Yeah.
one thing for plot that we did neglect to bring up when talking about notes. Um, Resident Evil 1 is the first mention of Ada.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I actually kind of forgot about this, and I was like, wait, is that making reference to Ada Wong? And yeah, it is, because in Resident Evil 2, Ada, at least in the PS1 version of Resident Evil 2, Ada mentioned she came to Raccoon City looking for her boyfriend John, and that note
Mm.
was left by John, Ada's
Yeah.
boyfriend.
And that's the pass. Yeah, that's the password
Yeah.
to the computer. Yeah.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah,
Very
it's
cool.
important.
And that is in the original PS1 version too, so that's not even something that remake added to tie it in, with
Well,
the other
I bet
games.
when they made two originally, they tried to draw on stuff from one. So like, I
Mm.
don't think,
Probably, yeah.
yeah, I don't think that was originally the intent. Obviously, they didn't even know who Ada Wong was going to be at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more so saying it was just interesting to see that that wasn't something that remake added in.
Right.
It was there all
To like
along.
tie things together like the G
Right.
note. Yeah.
Yeah, like like the stupid G note. Yeah. All right. Is there anything else specifically about the game? Oh, there is one thing that I do want to bring up, and that's regards to remake. We haven't. I touched on this a little earlier, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts. How do you feel this game has aged? Do you feel like it's aged well? Are there aspects that you don't feel haven't aged well? What do you think?
It is aged like the finest wine out there.
Mamma mia! Absolutely correct.
I would say like almost fine wine in almost all elements except the doors opening and the aiming of the gun with the fixed camera angles. Just I'd rather just not have to aim if it's a fixed camera angle. That those are the only two things. Oh, and the differences between easy, hard, and the dogs just being OP no matter what difficulty. Yeah, but that's like
Yeah.
a completionist problem, I think. But
Right. Like, but even there, it just goes back to what I was saying before about the whole thing just being a puzzle. It's like the best analogy I can make is that modern game design. It's like here's a sandbox and a couple of thing like triangle, circle, cylinder things to make shapes out of the sand. That's what a lot of modern game design is. And this game was so refreshing to me because it's like some instead of somebody saying go play in the sandbox with the little kids, it's like here's a Rubik's cube, go at it.
yeah,
That's the
Yeah.
best analogy I can make is just how refreshing the game design is compared to a lot of the stuff that we have today.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I'll say like my comments earlier about like the narrative perspective. Like I do wish there was a little more to that, but overall, yeah, I agree. Game is aged like very fine wine. It is. It's it's a testament to this game that like it's been years since I played it, and I jumped in and I remembered nearly everything, and I just went right in and just bang, bang, bang. Did objective after objective. I remember the layout of the mansion. It's just ingrained in my brain, and it stuck with me, and that's kind of what I'm trying to say. So, with regards to the aiming, in the PS1 version, when it came to North America, auto aim was for some reason, for some godforsaken reason, disabled.
Hmm.
They actively made the game harder for North Americans.
Great.
Um, and with the PS1 version, I don't think they did that with remake, but I
Yeah.
found it really funny that like they took away auto aim from our version of the PS1 version. Like, why?
Yeah.
Um,
I would like to see a Resident Evil game go back to this level of exploration in the modern way, like still have maybe the over the shoulder perspective, but like keep the inventory small and keep it where like the environment is a puzzle. I would like to see that
You won't.
modernized without spending too many hours opening doors.
You
well,
won't.
hey,
And the sad truth is that like the three of us can play this game and appreciate the genius of it because we grew up with these games, so we know what to expect.
we grew
But
up
the
on technical limitations.
yeah, exactly. It's the paradox of freedom, right? Too much freedom is a bad thing. Um, Modern, like the next generation of not next generation, the current generation of up and coming gamers do not have, I think, the patience or attention span
Yeah, they
for this
can't
kind
even
of
sit
game design.
through a couple of door animations. Like, come on.
Damn.
Which is which is a long-winded way of me saying you're not going to see this kind of design in a modern Resident Evil game.
Yeah, well, like, okay, is there anything else we need to talk about before the final question? Because this kind of does play into the final question quite a bit.
Oh, I just want to say, I thought it was pretty cool how like with ammo you could just like stack it in one inventory slot. Like you have like 500 pistol bullets and it'll just take one slot, which
Yeah.
makes sense based on the limited inventory in the game
Oh, but if
design.
you get two green herbs, no, they both take up their own slot.
Right? Yeah, you can't like stack herbs. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. You're right. Or like I don't know, some other items that were like
Well,
like grenades or something.
I
No,
guess
you can
technically you
stack
can.
flashbangs and knives. The defensive items stack.
Yeah, that is something I neglected to bring up that was new to the remake and is a great addition as well, is the defensive items.
Yeah.
The knives and the grenades and the stun guns for Jill, those don't take up a slot. And they're useful in a pinch if you get grabbed. They'll use one of those to let go. Um
Yeah.
Actually, Chris with the grenades, that was super helpful because I wound up during my playthrough, I had such a surplus of those that I would actually let myself get grabbed because Chris would stick one in their mouth. I run away a
Yeah.
little bit, shoot the grenade, and it blows their head clean off.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was a really easy way to get critical hits.
Again,
Um,
an intricacy that you wouldn't know unless you like played through it and experienced it. It's that
yeah,
game knowledge, building the game and making it more complex.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else before the final question?
No,
No.
Cool. So my final question, which kind of plays into what we were just talking about, is do you guys feel that Resident Evil needs a second remake to
absolutely
bring
not.
it? Hold on, let me finish the damn question. Your answer could be the same, but let me finish the question.
Heresy.
Does this game need another remake in the style and in the vein that 2 and 3 have gotten, where it's a third person over the shoulder game? Because like what I'll say before you guys give your answers is I do feel that 2 and 3, the remakes of those two games, have re-envisioned those two games in a very, very positive way. I'm like I said, I'm replaying the 2 remake, and man, it's so good at reimagining that game, and that game isn't like too dissimilar from Resident Evil 1. So for Resident Evil 2 remake to reimagine it in such a fresh way, I think it's really special. So that
Yeah.
being said, do you guys feel that one should get the same treatment?
No, because I think the pre-rendered backgrounds and the stationary camera are very important to the exploration of this game. and learning the layout of the map and being able to tell where you are just from how you're oriented, not just what the room looks like, so all the rooms can kind of blend, but the door layouts, the map, like how you look when you come into a room. It also adds to the atmosphere, in my opinion, that in a way that I think a rotatable third person camera doesn't.
Yeah, I agree with everything Jason's saying, but I don't think I don't want to say it needs a remake. I say I would want one just to see this design philosophy transformed in a way that that I think is more easily digestible from people like the newer audience, like people who haven't played the old school games, where like they're that like for me the main complaints again was the doors, the loading doors. Without that, obviously, and then the aiming. So like I would like to see the over the shoulder perspective just because I hated the aiming with the fixed camera. However, I do think it'll take away completely from the gameplay philosophy of you like should you don't like you shouldn't be able to headshot every single enemy so that they don't transform into crimson head. Like I feel like having that moment where you kill them, you don't get a headshot, and then they reanimate is something special. And I don't think that that would work well with the over the shoulder perspective because you could get headshots because you can aim properly. Like you don't have to worry about how far you are. Like it's pretty easy to
It,
aim in those games
it would
in
also
that
require
perspective.
them to completely rethink. There are so many second and third, down the line consequences. So, like you're just talking about with the more precise aiming, that means you got to add more enemies, more encounters.
Yeah.
It starts to become more focused on the combat as opposed to the exploration and the puzzle solving.
And
Yeah.
that's what I was about to bring up is the fact that it's well documented. Like hell, 2 Resident Evil 2 for PS1, if I remember correctly, was directed by Hideki Kamiya. Kamiya being well known for his action games.
Right,
Resident Evil 2 is a survival horror game almost second or about as equally as it is an action game. The
right.
game gives you a lot more resources and there's a lot more enemies, and you just go to town and mow them down. And then 3 even more so. So like those games translate much better to this over the shoulder third person perspective cuz there's inherently a ton more enemies to deal with in Raccoon City where those games take place. With this game being in this mansion, right, they would have to up the enemy count, or severely rebalance and limit how much ammo you actually find in the mansion to make your resources so limited that like there's hardly any point to having refined shooting mechanics, because you're hardly
Yeah.
going to be shooting the entire game. Um, it's interesting. It's something that I would welcome seeing purely because I love this game and I love the layout and I know it like the back of my hand. So seeing it in a new light would be really interesting and really welcome. But at the same time, I'm afraid of what they would do to it to modernize it because then some of the magic will be lost.
Right.
Yeah.
Or,
It's like
not
inevitable
will,
that it
could.
would be lost in that perspective. Like even from someone who kind of wants it, it would still very like I can see how it would be lost for sure.
Yeah. Um Okay, yeah, great discussion on that. I think it's a question that's important to ask because I do think that a lot of people do want a remake of Resident Evil 1 in that vein, and my stance has kind of always been why
You already
the
have one.
2002 remake is
Yeah.
right there and
I
it's
don't yeah,
damn
I
near
don't
perfect.
think they realize the game design of it, or maybe they don't remember because like I know I didn't for sure. And
Yeah.
how that perspective would definitely take away from that
Hmm.
100%.
Yeah. It's a weird and difficult thing to like effectively gamify like inventory management and limited resources, but they really did a fantastic job with this game, in every aspect. So
Yeah.
especially with having door animations every time you go to a new room.
I find it endearing.
I find it to be a waste of time, clearly.
I just have to. I'm gonna keep poking fun. I just
And
think
it
it's
was more like frustration with myself too, like, oh my god, I gotta go through the 3 doors
well.
again
Hey,
because I
hey,
forgot this item.
it happened to me too. Like I wasn't kidding when I said on this return playthrough, I'd walk into a room and be like, God fucking like, you know what actually got me was when you have to go when you get the battery and you can go and raise the water so that so the waterfall's not there so you can go into the caves. I grabbed I had the battery, I had everything, I thought I'm ready to go. I get all the way to where the bridge is and I remembered I didn't bring the fucking crank.
Yeah.
I had to
Yeah.
run all the way back, go through all these doors, go through all these paths, get to an item box, grab the crank, and then go. Yeah, it happens to me too. But like, I don't know. It's I'm kind of with Jason. I'm with both of you. It's frustrating. It's annoying, but I also find it endearing.
Hmm.
Um. So yeah. Anything else we want to talk about with regards to Resident Evil?
No, that's
No.
it.
Cool, Jason. What's the Klosnicki rating on this bad boy?
9.5 herbs.
Wow.
What?
Only because of the execution of like the dialogue, just the terrible dialogue. I
Yeah.
can't give it a 10 out of 10 because of the dialogue. And it's not like the cheese of Resident Evil 4, which is like we know this is cheesy, but we're going to execute the cheese the way cheese
Yeah.
should be executed.
It is expertly crafted cheese in
Yes,
4.
exactly.
Where did everyone go? Bingo.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Like,
Um,
yeah, Jill just saying "chow" out of nowhere is like, okay,
Yeah.
we talked about Yawn, the giant snake. We didn't really hone in on the fact that there's just multiple giant animals that you fight in this game.
Yeah.
They're just like
Z-
a mutated and large shark.
Yep. Uh,
Fucking I didn't even tell my spider story.
what's your spider
uh-oh.
story?
Guys, I have severe arachnophobia. The first time I played this
Ah.
game, I was in my apartment in Philadelphia by myself, had all the lights off because I was playing spooky games. I like to do that. I like to set the mood right. And first time I'm ever playing this game, I get to the guardhouse, I walk into the billiards room, and there's the spider right above the door that just starts crawling down the
Yeah.
wall. As soon as I walked in, I was like, fuck! And I went back through the door where it's safe in that hallway, put the controller down, and like got up and walked and paced around the apartment for like 10 minutes.
Wow. Okay, I
And
guess that's why you didn't like that puzzle.
I I almost quit the game right then and there. I couldn't deal with it.
Wow.
That was such a big fucking spider just hanging above your head for someone that doesn't know that's coming. Holy
Yeah.
shit.
It was furry too.
Yeah.
To be fair, the spiders leave you alone if you leave them alone until
No, they
obviously the
don't.
boss. Yeah, they do.
No, they
They
don't.
don't chase. They don't chase you or anything.
Well,
It's only
there's
if you get close to them that they start like
well,
hissing at
you
you.
okay, but the way that they're placed is you have to go past them. Like especially the ones in the basement. You
But
can't.
but they just stay in place and like rotate, but with their arms up, and they're
They
like
don't
hissing
move
at you.
like too fast or
Yeah,
anything.
And you guys are lucky because that's a stark contrast from them in the PS1 game
Okay.
because they are fucking fast and aggressive and fucking
Mm.
terrifying. But like they don't have they're not it's not as graphically good as
the remake. Yeah,
the remake, so like they're not fuzzy and gross
yeah. I
and
mean, the
awful.
whole point is to like trick you into thinking, "Oh my god, I need to start shooting." When you really don't, you can just run past them and nothing will happen to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh god. Okay. Yeah, that's my spider story. So, you're welcome.
Thanks.
How you got anything to plug?
I've just been playing Dead Space on Twitch. Twitch.tv
Nice.
slash Assassina.
The original?
Yes.
Cool.
Curb stomping those heads.
It's very good. Yes.
Are you playing on Xbox or on PS3?
Xbox.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I missed out, man. This is my first time like playing it through, like all the way. Oh my god.
Yeah.
It's probably one of my favorites.
I that's on my list for this month cuz I've never played fully through the original Dead Space. I only played it a little bit years and years and years ago, and for some reason it wasn't clicking. But I mean, that game is one of many games that were eventually, or that were inspired by Resident Evil 4.
Mm.
So there's no reason I shouldn't love it. I probably will if I give it the time.
Yeah,
But cool.
it's really good.
Yeah, go check Delilah's stream out at twitch.tv/assassina_san.
Yeah.
Jason, what you doing?
I'm not doing anything.
Cool. Good
I'm
talk.
here talking to you guys.
Yeah. And I have nothing to plug. Follow me on Twitter at Nibelheimi, and follow Delilah on Twitter at Assassina_San. Follow Jason on Twitter at SolidQuaz, but don't follow him. He doesn't.
Why do you insist on putting it in there?
Because it's part of my flow. It's part of my flow. I can't.
Part of the branding now.
I can't suddenly remove you out, because then I'd also have to remove but don't follow him. He doesn't do anything. He forgets he has Twitter. Okay, it's part of my flow. Just let me be. Let me live my life.
Fair enough.
I'm sure it's comfort food for somebody out there.
Yeah, I bet you there are a bunch of people shitting on me on Twitter, and I don't even know because I'm not on Twitter.
And follow Dead Cell Media at Dead Cell Media. Follow the show at Dead Cell Media, on Twitter. Yeah, Dead Cell Media.
Did we say what game we're playing yet?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
We'll get to that after.
My bad. I forget.
God, the flow, Delilah.
I know. Jason messed me up. No, I'm just kidding. That was me messing myself up. I'm just blaming you.
With his mojo. There's cross-mogination going on.
If you like this episode, if you're listening on YouTube, thank you. Please give it a like, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, follow the show, leave us a comment, tell us what you think of a potential remake of a remake. You know, we already got a remaster of this game, remaster of a remake. Hey, recently we got a remake of a remaster with The Last of Us. So, you know, the game industry is doing all sorts of hokey things. So yeah, let us know in the comments. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, thank you so much. Please rate and review the show, 5 stars preferred. Tell us what you like, tell us what you didn't like. And if you're listening on Spotify, again, thank you. Please rate the show. I assume it's a star rating, so 5-star. Give us the top ratings on all the things that you listen to us on, please. It helps tremendously. Share the show with your family, your friends, your pets, your children. I don't, probably not the children. We curse a lot. And yeah, Delilah, what's our next game?
A Plague Tale Requiem. I almost forgot what it was called.
Yeah, we did do an episode on Plague Tale Innocence way back in like 2020, I think. So play the first game, listen to our podcast on it, and if you have Game Pass, A Plague Tale Requiem launching on the Game Pass, I think on October 18th. So download the game. If you have a Game Pass subscription, no reason not to. Yeah. Play through it and look out for our episode on that game sometime probably in early November. Yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye
everybody, and have a happy Halloween. Or actually Halloween will be past the next episode.
Halloween started September 1st. It's all good.
No, wait, September 1st, October 1st.
Nah.
Halloween's not a 2-month affair.
It is now.
Okay. It's like Christmas now, man.
Yeah, then November 1st is Christmas.
All right. Anyway, listeners, thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.